Welcome to another episode of Victoria's Lounge from the Azure Hotel, Nairobi. Now, why would someone choose to take their life? How and why would they get to a point where they feel that life is not worth living? Well, according to the WHO, 17 out of every 100,000 deaths is suicide here in Kenya. And on this particular month, when World Suicide Prevention Day has been commemorated, we thought we'd have a conversation on an issue that is still considered a crime in Kenya and is still viewed as culturally shameful. Well, we have some people who are brave enough to share their stories of why they chose life and hopefully help save other lives. Let's meet them now and start the conversation. Vivian Wairimu Gaiko is a wife and mother who runs Empower Mama Foundation that supports grieving parents. Her struggle with depression and even suicide attempts prompted her to start the organization after losing her first child that took her down a dark path. She shares her experience to help others struggling with suicide see that life is worth living. Ian Kanyi, more popularly known as Ian Jege, is a husband, a father, a creative, and CEO of Conceptual Grey, a content and digital marketing agency. It's the brighter and more positive chapter of his life after 7 suicide attempts and bouts of depression and addiction. Ian shares that part of his life and story through a vlog on YouTube called Jagged Life. And tonight, on Victoria's Lounge. Dr. Susan Hinga is a psychiatrist at the Kenyatta University School of Medicine with special interest in women's mental health. She hopes suicide is decriminalized to reduce stigma placed upon those who grapple with mental health conditions here in Kenya. Remember, hashtag Victoria's Lounge is how you can chime into the conversation on social media as usual. This is not a very easy topic to talk about, but Ian, you've been very vocal on social media, on YouTube, just sharing your experience and trying to help people who have been going through more or less the same. But I can imagine Ian was not always going through a troubled space in his life. What was life like before you started going through the mental issues?
Pretty awesome. A pretty normal late teens, early 20s. Developed a pretty decent career. But I think it's in the fabric of all that the stuff really started happening. But it was so subtle, no one noticed it. It seemed like, it's everyday stuff, so it went unnoticed for a really, really long time. But for the most part, I was like everyone else. I was happy, had a job, had friends, had family.
Right.
Your everyday guy.
So in that kind of scenario, when did the rain start hitting? When did it really start becoming an issue?
The depression had always kind of been somewhere in the background, because the very first time I had suicidal thoughts was I think I was 8 or 9. There was a lot of stuff happening at home, and don't get me wrong, we had an amazing upbringing. My sister and I, we were brought up by my grandma, but we had lost our dad, and mom had left the country, just trying to seek greener pastures. But I guess there was just a lot of undealt with stuff. I didn't realize how much of that had taken into my adulthood. So when it started showing, is after I moved in with my girlfriend, and I think that was the first time I had a decent job. I was working in an ad agency. Access to a lot of drinking, and it became a part of my everyday, and I didn't realize that I was shielding myself from what was really happening inside. People around me might have noticed it then, that I think there's a problem here.
Right. Is that interesting? Because a lot of times, and Dr. Hinga, you can speak to this, there's some unresolved issues, and he talked about it in his childhood, and then it's repressed, and then you go through life, things are happening, moving, you're hitting at all cylinders, and then you're exposed now to alcohol, which really kind of exacerbates the situation. But if you can kind of take us through the trail, if you will, of destruction that someone can take themselves through.
All right. Listening to Ian's story, it's a story that you tend to hear with very many people who end up with substance use and end up with addictions. And many of these people will trace the issues of how they ended up using alcohol back from childhood. Either they were introduced to using substances by parents or people who were around them, or they had certain things that they were going through that were unresolved and they didn't know how to get out of them or how to get help. So many of them will also end up using substances to try and numb the feeling of whatever they are going through as a result of childhood experiences that may not be very, very, very positive. And that can grow, that can start from there, and it can grow even into adulthood, where people now start using substances where they're able to afford. Remember, in childhood, probably you can't afford, you're just starting off. But as you grow older, you're now able to afford, and of course you will increase the amount of the alcohol that you're taking. And as time goes on, things like tolerance come in, and you want to use more alcohol to achieve the same effect. And of course, some of them will unfortunately end up in dependence. We do know that many of people who end up with alcohol dependence may actually have some underlying mental illness that either was undetected, or they have failed either to seek treatment because nobody maybe is aware that they are unwell. And when that is not treated, people tend to use substances in a hope that they can feel better rather than seeking help to get treated of whatever illness they have. And the same alcohol itself actually makes depression worse. So it's a chicken egg story. Sometimes you can't tell what came before the other. So issues of substances, issues of untreated or undetected mental illnesses are a big thing, and they can start all the way down from childhood.
Wow.
Yes.
And for you, Vivian, someone could look at you and think, this woman doesn't look like she's gone through anything, you know? But just take us through your journey, because there was a point in your life where something triggered, I guess, the depression and some of the suicidal behavior. But just take us through your story.
Oh, well, back in 2014, I was still a student, and I happened to get pregnant, and I was going to have a baby. So for me and my husband, he's my husband now, we are pro-life, so there was no any other way. So I had to defer school for a whole academic year, and just to nurture the pregnancy, and even I factored in the 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding, and everything was quite smooth until birth. And then 16 days later, I lost the baby. Yeah, so I mean, I couldn't sink it in that it is real, it has happened. Trying to understand her death is what really made me suicidal. I was thinking of, there's no any other way out now. I have to leave this earth like right now. So it was hard for me. Yeah.
I mean, Dr. Hinka, listening to Vivian's story, that one moment in her life where she said she was blaming everyone, probably blaming herself and wondering, why me? And now trying to process the death, and then so many things being compounded. How does someone like Vivian kind of process something like that and not go to the extreme of thinking life is not worth living?
Okay, I'll probably start off by describing what it is that she was going through. This is more of when we say that it's when bereavement doesn't flow the way it should. Usually if somebody has lost a loved one, there are certain things that happen to you. You go through shock, you go through denial, you try and bargain and hope that this person will come back, then you go through depression, and eventually you get into acceptance state. Now, some people, unfortunately, may not follow that trail, which is the usual trail, so that they go all the way up to acceptance stage. And sometimes you may get stuck in one place. And most of the times where people get stuck is in the depressive state, the depression stage, and they fail to maneuver through and move on to other stages. Now, what we usually will say with bereavement is that the first thing is we encourage that people who are around the person who has lost a loved one, just sit and listen to this person, just spending time with them, offering practical help, like for example, helping with funeral arrangements, providing whatever finances or whatever else that these people who have lost a loved one would need. And through that, coming together, praying together, just spending time with a person, we would hope that somebody will go through bereavement the usual way. But sometimes things go the other way. And if people do get stuck, like she did, at the depression stage, and maybe end up with full-blown depression later, then they would need more than just the usual help of people just coming around socially and helping them. Then we would encourage that they seek help from a professional, probably start with a counselor or a psychologist to see whether they can help them just go through the stages and hopefully reach the acceptance stage. But of course, sometimes as psychiatrists, we also are called in to intervene if we really do need to treat patients, but usually we do not tend to treat patients around the time of bereavement. We allow people to go through bereavement, and hopefully just with counseling and having a lot of social support around you, that people can maneuver and get through up to acceptance stage.
Yeah, and I have to ask this, Vivian, because as you're going through that time, I'm sure you didn't feel comfortable being open about what it was you're going through. You felt, this is something I have to keep to myself. No one needs to know, which is also a danger zone. But just take us through that point of, it's really isolation, where you feel you have no one to talk to. Oh, they're there, but you just feel, I'm only one going through this.
Maybe I can say, like, from the pregnancy, I do want people to know about it. Even when I gave birth and she passed on, I mean, nobody knew about the birth, and so nobody deserved to know about the death. So it was eating me up.
Ian, for you, what were some of your triggers, at least just before you were on that verge of committing suicide? What are some of the things that you felt, oh, I'm nearing that place?
I remember there was a period of time that I had been trying to look for work for a long time. I was first working somewhere, and then I took a 1-year sabbatical, went back home with my grandmom in Nyeri. And when I decided to finally come back and the process of looking for work, that was extremely stressful. I didn't know where to start, and I was trying to do a career shift. Before that, I was in audio engineering. I was really trying to get into advertising. We had just moved in with my girlfriend, and that's when it became a bit more frequent. Before that, it would be a thought that would pop into my head. In childhood, maybe I'll try and swallow some pills somewhere. But after I came back from Nyeri, that's when it really, really began. I would say at least once a month would go through this. Now, the worst part is the closest person to me at that time, my girlfriend, had no idea. We shared a house. She would go to work in the morning. I would be at home writing concepts all day, going through stuff. She would never know, and she would come back in the evening. I would completely hide it. She would have no idea what I was really going through, but it became very frequent after that. Yeah.
Wow. And I mean, I know for a lot of people, loved ones who have family members who have suicidal thoughts or going through depression, a lot of times say they're the best actors. You will never know. And I guess that's what we'll be talking about as we continue the conversation, is looking out for those warning signs, those red flags. So at least you're able to help someone before it's too late. On that note, let's take a short break here on Victoria's Lounge. Keep the conversation going on social media. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Victoria's Lounge. Now, Ian, as we were going to break, you were just kind of explaining some of the moments where you would kind of feel yourself nearing. But even as you're kind of deciphering the pain, if you will, I'm sure there was points where you felt like you're running away from the reality of what you were feeling. And now I guess the alcohol would come in and other things would come in to kind of cover up what it was. But when did you face what it was you're going through and actually acknowledge there is a problem?
A couple of years later, this is, I think, 3-4 years after I'd really started going through phases when I wanted to commit suicide. Things were good. I did land that advertising job. Turns out I was pretty decent at it. Nation Media Group spotted me and headhunted me, and suddenly I was this 26-year-old with a pretty decent job. Life was awesome. But something had happened in the period of time when I was trying to self-medicate with alcohol. So now here's Nation, a bit more money to spend, the drinking got a bit more. And before long, it was more than just alcohol. I was drinking so much, like I would leave work at about 5 or 6, sometimes 7, and I would drink until 4, 5 in the morning. And I have to be at work pretty early in the morning. And I was really struggling with the hangovers until someone told me, hey, there's a way to sort this out. And that's how cocaine kind of came into the picture. One day I woke up and decided, okay, enough of all this. I withdrew everything I had in my accounts and I left for Mombasa. And I mean, that period of my life still bends me out of shape a little bit. I was there for 3 weeks. I didn't hold back. Complete indulgence. I mean, everything. One morning I woke up and I went for a short call. And for some reason I happened to look down at the toilet and, I saw something that looked like black coffee. And you don't have to be a doctor to figure out something's very wrong. Yeah. At this point, I was averaging well over 2 liters of vodka a day. It's the tolerance you were talking about. I had really pushed mine up. Yeah. So I think my kidneys were just giving in. I decided, okay, let's take a break today. Let's hydrate. Let's rest and sleep. And it's going to be okay. 2 hours after that internal conversation, I was sick. I was sweating profusely. I was throwing up. I mean, it was crazy. The place I was staying at had a cleaner who came in every morning. And she looked at me and wondered, hey, you look different today. Are you okay? I told her, I'm okay. I think I ate something bad yesterday. Okay. And she went about her business. About an hour later, when she was just about done, she said, I've seen this before. Someone stayed here before and they looked exactly like this before they had their morning drink. Have you had your morning drink today? And I said, no, I don't want to. My stomach is a mess. She said, trust me, go have your. And I did. And everything settled. Everything just calmed down and I was myself again. And that's when I knew, okay, consequences have just come calling. That's when I first knew that everything that I thought I'd been getting away with had just caught up.
And you realized, okay, my life is literally spiraling out of control.
Oh, I mean, now the depression spiked. Yeah. At this point, later on, we discovered that it was actually manic depression. But I had these very cyclic moments where I would wake up one day fully excited about life. Let's celebrate. And a couple of hours later, I'm in the room and I don't want to talk to anyone. But after I made the discovery that the things I had done had real consequences, now I decided, okay, there's no going back from this. I will have to end my life at some point. Wow. And that began a series of 3 suicide attempts, back to back.
I'm curious because I know for you, Ian and Vivian, you've had several suicide attempts, and each time you get there, I wonder, because I was listening to another individual who was sharing his same experience, and he said the thing that kind of kept him going was the thought of just one more day. What's tomorrow going to be like? And I wonder for you, just before you got into that process of thinking it's not worth it, did you ever consider that?
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, there are some points I really wanted to, I didn't want to die, and I was like, I have these goals I want to achieve at this age. I'm this ambitious person, and when I said to do something, I really want to do it. But now, I don't know, maybe the Tari can explain to us, these thoughts, there's some way that they just don't go. They just don't go, they just don't come and go. So for me, when I decided to maybe swallow the pills, I will do it right there and then. So for me, thinking about maybe living another day at that point was not really possible, but maybe after, now after the failed attempt.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Dr. Inga, it's like an assault on your mind. We don't realize how powerful the mind is, that no other recourse of maybe I could, nothing really kind of enters in terms of hope. You're literally assaulted in your mind that no, you have to do it now. What is happening then, for someone who's kind of going through a suicidal attempt?
The top on our list, even in our country, of people who end up committing suicide are people who have certain mental illnesses like depression. So a depressed patient feels like they're not worth living, they're not worth even looking forward toward the future. So that is usually top on our list in mental illness. But we also have another category, like what he was describing, patients who have bipolar. When they're in the manic phase and they're feeling very energetic, they're also very impulsive. So in that impulsivity, they can
go ahead and commit suicide. Other patients have certain mental illnesses where they hear voices, so the voices could tell them commit suicide or drink this and that. And that falls in the category of mental illness, which is top on our list, even in our country, of people who commit suicide. The other thing that makes people attempt suicide or commit suicide is personal loss. Now, whether the loss is from a relationship that is not working, loss is from maybe they failed an exam, or they have lost a loved one, or the business is not doing very well, or whatever loss that people think this loss is too much, I can't bear it. That is the other category that will may attempt suicide, and some may be unfortunately successful, and we may lose them.
Yeah.
The other category, of course, is the people who are using substances, and substances can actually make you impulsive. Like alcohol can make you impulsive, so in that impulsive moment, some patients will actually commit suicide. So it's nice to hear that she sat down and started thinking, I have something else I can look forward to at that moment, and decided, no, I'm not going to do it. But when we lack that, then unfortunately we may actually lose a patient who successfully commits suicide.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, Ian, for you, how many attempts did you actually make?
Through my life?
Yeah.
7.
You know, it's interesting because we don't think about suicide being like, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem, you know, and it's really, you don't realize until you've woken up from a failed attempt. Please take us through emotionally what that was like, and mentally. You've woken up and it didn't work.
That string of 3 times back to back. The first time, at this point, I had gone and seen a psychiatrist, and they had able to ascertain that I had some kind of depression. So I think he had given me some kind of mood stabilizers by day and some kind of tranquilizer at night. And I had these meds with me in Mombasa when this was the day after I realized that something was very messed up. I swallowed all of them. There must have been a month's worth of dosage with a half bottle of vodka, and I lay in bed waiting. And I woke up the next day, and I had been sick in the night, and I threw out all the tablets, and most of them were still intact. First I was upset. I was like, okay. But I think at this point something different than every other time before had happened. I had decided that this was going to get done. Yeah, I had decided that I'm not leaving this town. So very quickly I sat down and came up with a new plan. Looked around the car cottage, and I found the back balcony had a clothing line where you can hang your clothes, and it looked like it could hold my weight. So I untied it, went to the top floor where they had like beams that ran across the building. They looked strong enough again, so I rigged it up and hid it so the cleaner didn't see it. This was like mid-morning. I said, okay, fine, I'll come deal with this a bit later. So went through the day. I would spend my day at the bar, then in the evening came back, closed the door, and again got crazy drunk, went upstairs, jumped off the rope. I woke up the next day to shooting pains in my back. So I was really big. At that point I was at 115 kgs, so the rope couldn't handle my weight and it cut. And I fell back to something not too different from this. So I fell back on my back and blacked out. So I woke up in the morning, pain. Now at this point I was angry. I was like, we need a permanent solution. I had made friends with a couple of beach boys, very resourceful guys. And I convinced him that, hey, I need to protect myself. Do you have access to someone who might have a gun? He's like, he looked at me, no questions asked, and he said, I'll give you a call a bit later. A couple of hours later, he calls, he said, yes, it's going to cost you 40,000, M-Pesa, done.
Wow.
2 hours later or thereabout, he came, gave me the piece, again, no questions asked. We enjoyed a drink, we had a conversation, the guy left. And I remember that evening was a Friday. I was watching James Bond inside of the cottage, and I remember seeing the silver revolver on the table. There was a bottle of vodka that was almost done. There was a pack of cigarettes, and there was my phone. And suddenly my phone rings. At this point I'd changed my number. To this day, my granny and I have had this conversation trying to figure out exactly how it happened, because she just had this instinctive feeling to call. And she called the number she's always had, and somehow it came.
Wow.
I don't remember diverting calls, or maybe I'd called someone who gave her I don't know. And she called, and the first thing she said is, do not do it. Yeah, don't hurt yourself. We can try and figure it out. And for the first time in a really long time, I allowed myself to just break down. And I cried and were on the phone for a really long time, and I explained everything that was going on, and she's like, we'll take care of it. And she asked me, where are you? And I told her, and she had someone come over the following day, and then began my very long recovery journey.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, every time I woke up from a failed attempt, it was either disappointment or just downright anger.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I have to make this very clear for those who are watching who may be going through more or less the same emotions. We are not giving you options
Yeah,
of
please.
how to end your life. It is not an option.
Yeah.
These are recounting of very dark parts of their lives. And we will also give you help if you need it. At the end of the show, we'll have something coming up on the screen. We'll also have information on our Facebook pages, but it is not an answer to your problems. On that note, let's take a short break. Keep it right here in Victoria's Lounge. Welcome back. So in this part of the show, we want to talk about the positive, the healing process, the recovery process. Vivian, for you, what was your wake-up call, you know, after having gone through all of that?
It was August the 18th. I remember it was a Monday, and I was having lunch in the house. I was alone. My husband had gone to work, so most of the time, the whole day I was just in the house alone. So I'm having this mchelenjeri, you know, it's rice mixed with potatoes, tomatoes, and danias and everything you can imagine. So I was having this lunch, and then a potato somehow it wedged in my throat. It went the wrong way. It went to my windpipe, to my airway. So I don't know. I tried to remember that moment. I was so in pain. I tried coughing this potato. I can't even reach my back to hit my back. I'm alone in the house. My neighbors, we are only four neighbors. So the others had gone to work. I was alone in the compound. So I tried to hit myself. I don't know, but it's God's grace. So this time I was trying to imagine, oh my God, I really don't want to die. It's this painful. So I'm trying to even say prayers. I'm like, God forgive me. You know, I want to be reunited with my daughter. I just don't want to die. So for me, when that potato came out, I even didn't finish that food. That's when I started reflecting. I'm like, what am I doing? That's when sense came back to me, really. And the next month, September, now I was going back to school for the other academic year. So I was looking forward to that. It kept me going. And somehow I forgot about all that incident at that point. It was in 2014. So sometime in 2016, in January, a neighbor, a lady within my neighborhood, she had just got her bundles of joy. They were twins, they were the firstborns, and then suddenly they passed on like an hour apart. They were in the house. So one was sleeping and the other one was with the lady, and now the one sleeping apparently passed on earlier than the one she was holding. So when the husband went to look at this baby, he found the baby had passed away. And now this other one, the lady thought she was sleeping. Apparently, I really don't know what happened. So the baby also passed away. So the baby she was carrying also passed away. The lady went, locked herself up. That evening, I don't know, the husband was now trying to rush, calling friends, calling family, and they didn't take the babies to the mortuary right there and then. So when the husband was coming back with their relatives, they found the lady had already committed suicide. So they broke the door, entered, and found she was already gone. And you know, for that man, I think it must have been very hard losing 3 people the same day. It was really hard for him. Yeah, so for me that was a wake-up call. That's when I decided I really need to talk about what happened to me. Maybe I can help someone, you know, because it's through sharing that another person maybe can get some help as well. So I decided to talk about my story, and I started sharing on, I wrote a blog, I just wrote my story. It was raw, the way I went through it. And people called me, I really received good feedback. And people were like, Vivian, you mean you can do that? Why you? Someone positive, someone negative. Yeah, but really that was my wake-up call. And I decided to form an organization that supports grieving parents. Because for me, that was the source, the background of this suicidal attempt.
Yeah.
So when we get good support, good bereavement support, those even suicidal thoughts will not be there, because you'll feel you're not alone. There are people all around you.
And that's the thing, Dr. Hinga, is the stigma attached to this, and I guess it's twofold, because it is considered a crime, and then there's also the cultural aspect. It's frowned upon. It's something shameful. No one should ever think about taking their life. So when you have people like Ian and Vivian who are brave enough to share their stories, the impact it has, but again, how do we kind of decrease that stigma and let people know it is okay to talk about it?
One of the chief ways that we fight stigma, whether it's stigma towards suicide attempts or suicide or any mental illness which has a lot of stigma, is by passing information to the public. It's people understanding, like for example, what this lady went through, and having not to look back and say that they are cursed or they did something or they failed to do something, and explaining it as though it was a crisis, and in that moment of a crisis, and she did an impulsive thing, and the impulsive thing that she did was commit suicide, and she was successful. When you sit down and explain to people to help them understand that this is mental illness or this was a crisis, then when they understand, the stigma is less. When people don't understand, then there's more stigma attached to it. So the way we can fight stigma is talking about it.
Yes.
Okay. And that's something you've been very good at, Ian, and even attracted the attention of some organizations as well to see the need for something like this. But take us through your healing process, and also what part your YouTube channel and other social media initiatives play in all of this.
This is 5 years into this journey, and for the most part, I focused the first three and a half years on just figuring out quite a few things. One of the things I had a problem with, I despised the fact that I had been told that I'd always need medication. That wasn't sitting well with me. After I went into rehab the second time, after I got out the first time, I think 2 or 3 months, had a relapse, went to a different rehab, and something shifted. I read a book that began something that changed my life. I discovered meditation, and like everyday meditation began to become part of my life while I was still in rehab. And I'm glad I found this book early, because it became apparent, or it became very clear to me that I wanted out of the medication. I remember booking a meeting with the therapist, the person who runs the rehab, and my psychiatrist, and I told them, guys, this is a very conscious decision on my part. I want out of this medication, and there isn't a better place than inside of rehab for you to get me off this medication. And so we began the weaning process, and by the time I was done with my 3 months, I was off meds.
Wow.
Naturally, I was afraid of anything that would put me in a pressure situation, so I treated myself with kitty glass for the longest time. And then my daughter was born, probably the most stressful 2 weeks of my life.
Wow.
And I did not drink, I did not break down, I did not try to commit suicide. In fact, something special happened. After I held her for the first time, I swore to her with all that I am that I'd always do whatever it took to take care of her. And that's just then, I never had another suicide thought. And I think it's because there was something greater than myself to finally live for. And then, of course, the continued meditation, how I ended up talking about this. For the longest time during employment, I couldn't exactly shout it from the rooftops, because your employer might wonder, so... A couple of years back, I started working for myself, and the thoughts of sharing what I had discovered became almost impulsive. And a couple of months ago, I started a vlog through which I'm sharing what my experiences have been, what I think, and through those channels, social media, I'm helping direct guys to people like Daktari who can help people make sense of what they're going through. And I always tell guys, I'm not trained. All I can do is speak from my personal experience.
So I would not also recommend that people just wake up and get off their medications. If you have a problem with your medication, I think the best thing is to go back to your provider and sit and have a candid discussion with them. Talk to your doctor and say, what is it that you're going through? What are you feeling? And let that discussion progress from there. Don't wake up and just stop your medication.
Okay. So there's so many elements to this. There's the mental, emotional, the biological level of this as well. So when it comes to medication, it's also scientific. You have to be on your meds for that.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Vivian, Dr. Hinga, and Ian, for sharing your stories. And I hope this is an encouragement to those watching out there who feel like life is not worth living. There's hope. And if anything, think about tomorrow. It is worth living to see. So I hope you were encouraged from the stories that you heard. We also have some helpful information coming up on the screens right now. We'll also have the links to Vivian's blog and to Ian's vlog. So you can go and get some more encouragement, some more tips. We'll also have the contacts for Dr. Hinga, so you can reach out and get some help there as well. You're not alone. And should never feel that you are isolated and going through this by yourself. Thank you for watching. Thank you to Azure Hotel Nairobi for hosting us. Keep the conversation going on social media, #Victoria's Lounge. We always love to hear from you. Have a wonderful evening, and let's do this again next week. But it doesn't seem to be here. Yes. So